You're letting everything in, every criticism, every insult, every bad day, every rejection, every disappointment. It all lands, it all sticks, it all affects you, and you carry it around like weight, like evidence, like proof that something's wrong with you, with your life, with your path. And here's what you don't realize. You're not supposed to absorb everything. You're not supposed to internalize every opinion, every setback, every piece of negativity that comes your way. Your mind isn't a sponge. It's supposed to be a filter, and right now your filter is broken. Everything gets through, nothing bounces off, and you wonder why you're exhausted, why you're anxious, why you can't shake things, why other people's moods, other people's words, other people's energy seems to control yours. And the answer is simple. You never built immunity. You never trained your mind to let things pass through without letting them in, to observe, without absorbing, to be aware, without being affected. And that vulnerability, that openness to every external input, it's not sensitivity, it's not empathy, it's just an untrained mind. And an untrained mind gets sick, gets infected, gets poisoned by things that shouldn't have power over it. The Stoics understood this. They lived in a world of chaos, of politics, of betrayal, of constant external pressure, and they didn't survive it by being impervious to everything. They survived it by building immunity, by training their minds to recognize what was theirs to carry and what wasn't. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they all taught the same thing. You can't control what comes at you, but you can control whether it gets in, and getting in versus passing by. That distinction is everything. That's the difference between a mind that's constantly disturbed and a mind that stays calm, between someone who's shaken by everything and someone who's shaken by nothing. And if you're tired, if you're worn down, if you're carrying weight that isn't even yours, then what you need isn't thicker skin. What you need is an immune mindset, a trained capacity to let the toxicity pass without letting it poison you. And that's what I'm going to show you how to build. The first principle of an immune mindset is understanding this. Not everything that touches you needs to affect you. Most people don't understand the difference between contact and infection. Something happens. Someone says something. The world delivers bad news. And immediately, it's inside you. It's affecting your mood, your energy, your thoughts, your whole day. And you think that's normal. You think that's just how it works. Something bad happens. You feel bad. Something critical is said. You feel criticized. But that's not inevitable. That's learned. That's a pattern. And patterns can be unlearned, because here's the truth. You can be aware of something without being affected by it. You can hear criticism without believing it. You can witness chaos without joining it. You can be in the presence of negativity without absorbing it. The key is creating space, creating a gap between the external event and your internal response. And in that gap, in that tiny moment of separation, you have a choice. Do I let this in, or do I let this pass? And most people never create that gap, never build that space. They go straight from stimulus to response, from contact to infection. Something touches them, and immediately they're changed immediately. They're affected immediately. It's theirs, and they carry it for hours, for days, sometimes for years, because they never learned to filter. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that again. The pain is not due to the thing itself. Someone insults you, that's the thing itself. But you feeling insulted, you feeling diminished, you feeling hurt, that's your estimate of it. That's your interpretation. That's what you're doing with it. And if it's what you're doing, then you can do something different. You can let it land without letting it stick. You can hear it without holding it. You can observe it without owning it. Here's what this looks like in practice. Someone criticizes your work, and instead of immediately defending or immediately believing, you pause, you create the gap, and you ask, is this true? Is this useful? Is this worth carrying? And if it's not, if it's just noise, if it's just projection, if it's just someone else's opinion based on their perspective, then you let it pass. You acknowledge it. You maybe even thank them, and then you release it. You don't argue with it. You don't internalize it. You don't let it become yours, because not everything that's said about you is about you, and not everything that touches you deserves to get in. I know someone who used to be destroyed by criticism, any negative feedback, any harsh word, any disapproval, and it would spiral them for days. They'd replay it, they'd internalize it, they'd use it as evidence that they weren't good enough. And one day someone told them, "You're treating every opinion like it's a medical diagnosis, like it's fact, like it's truth." When really, it's just data. It's just one person's perspective, and you get to decide what to do with it. And that reframe, that shift from opinion as truth to opinion as data, it changed everything, because data doesn't have to hurt you. Data is just information, and you can look at information without letting it define you. Epictetus taught his students some things are up to us, and some things are not. And what people say, what people think, what people feel about you, that's not up to you. That's external. That's theirs. The only thing up to you is what you do with it, whether you absorb it or release it, whether you let it in or let it pass. And building immunity starts here, starts with recognizing that contact doesn't equal infection, that exposure doesn't equal absorption, that something touching you doesn't mean it has to change you. You can be in the rain without drowning. You can be in the fire without burning. You can be in the noise without losing your peace, but only if you train for it. Only if you practice creating that gap, creating that space between what happens and how you respond. The second principle is this: immunity isn't built by avoiding exposure. It's built by controlled exposure, by facing the thing, by letting it touch you, and practicing not letting it in. Most people think building a strong mind means hiding from negativity, means creating a bubble, means only surrounding themselves with positive people, positive content, positive everything. And yes, environment matters. Yes, you should be selective, but if you never face negativity, if you never practice being in the presence of criticism, of chaos, of difficulty, then when it inevitably comes, when the bubble breaks, you have no immunity. You have no defense. You're completely vulnerable because you never trained. You never built the antibodies that come from exposure. Here's how this works in the body when you get a vaccine. They give you a small controlled dose of the thing that could hurt you. Not enough to make you sick, but enough to teach your body how to fight it, and your immune system learns. It builds defenses, it creates antibodies, so that when the real thing comes, when the full-strength version arrives, your body knows what to do. It's ready, it's trained, and the same principle applies to your mind. If you want mental immunity, you need controlled exposure. You need to voluntarily face small doses of the thing, so that when big doses come, you're not destroyed by them. Seneca practiced this deliberately. He called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. He would sit and imagine the worst things that could happen: losing his wealth, losing his position, losing people he loved, and he'd sit with those images, he'd feel them. He'd ask himself, how would I handle this? What would I do? And in that practice, in that controlled exposure, he was building immunity, so that when real loss came, when real hardship arrived, he wasn't shattered, because he'd already been there mentally. He'd already faced it in simulation, and his mind knew how to handle it. You need the same practice. You need to voluntarily put yourself in situations that challenge you, that expose you to the things you're afraid of in small controlled doses. Someone disagrees with you, and instead of avoiding conflict, you engage. You practice staying calm while being challenged. Someone criticizes you, and instead of spiraling, you practice observing it, evaluating it, deciding what to keep and what to release. You face rejection, you face failure, you face discomfort, Not because you enjoy it, but because you're training, you're building the immunity that comes from exposure. I watched someone build this systematically. They were terrified of public speaking, terrified of judgment, terrified of being seen. So they started small. They spoke up in a small meeting just once, and it was uncomfortable. Their heart raced, their voice shook, but they did it, and nothing terrible happened, and they did it again and again. And slowly the dose increased, bigger meetings, bigger audiences, bigger stakes. And each time they were building immunity, they were teaching their mind that exposure to judgment doesn't have to destroy them, that they can be seen and survive, that they can be criticized and still be okay. And eventually what used to terrify them barely registered, because they'd built the antibodies, they'd faced it so many times in controlled doses, that the fear lost its power. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote, "Does what's happened keep you from acting with justice? Generosity, self-control, sanity, prudence, honesty, humility, straightforwardness. And if the answer is no, then it hasn't really hurt you. It's just exposed you to something your mind needs to learn to handle. And the learning happens through exposure, through practice, through facing it, and discovering you survive. Here's the practice once a week. Do something that makes you uncomfortable, that exposes you to a small dose of what you fear. If you fear rejection, ask for something you might not get. If you fear criticism, share something you made. If you fear conflict, have a difficult conversation. And in each exposure, practice staying calm. Practice observing without absorbing. Practice letting it touch you without letting it in. Because that practice, that controlled exposure, is building immunity, building the capacity to face the real thing when it comes. And it will come, and when it does, you'll be ready. Not because you avoided it, but because you trained for it. The third principle is fundamental. Your mind needs a framework, needs a philosophy, needs a set of principles that filter what gets in and what doesn't, because without that framework, without that filter, everything gets through, everything affects you, everything sticks, because you have no criteria for what matters and what doesn't, what's true and what's noise, what's yours to carry and what's theirs to deal with. And that absence, that philosophical void, is why you're vulnerable, is why everything lands, is why you can't shake things, because you're operating without standards. Here's what I mean. When criticism comes, when negativity arrives, when someone projects their stuff onto you, what determines whether it affects you? What determines whether you internalize it or release it? And for most people, the answer is nothing. There's no filter, there's no framework. It's just whatever feels most convincing in the moment, whatever their mood allows, whatever their insecurity makes them believe. And so they're at the mercy of every external input, of every opinion, of every piece of negativity that comes their way, because they have no internal standard to measure it against. But when you have a framework, when you have principles, when you have a philosophy that defines what matters, what's true, what's worth internalizing, then everything that comes at you gets filtered through that framework, and most of it doesn't make it through. Most of it gets recognized as noise, as projection, as someone else's stuff, and you let it pass because it doesn't align with your principles. Epictetus built his entire teaching on this. He taught that the chief task in life is to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself, which are externals not under my control and which have to do with the choices I actually control. And that separation, that framework, is the filter. Everything that comes at you, you run it through this. Our framework is this: under my control. And if it's not, if it's someone else's opinion, someone else's mood, someone else's projection, then it's external, and externals don't determine your worth, don't determine your peace, don't determine who you are, and so you let them pass. You acknowledge them, you maybe learn from them, but you don't internalize them, you don't carry them because they didn't pass through the filter. I know someone who built their framework around 3 questions. Whenever something negative came their way, whenever criticism arrived, whenever chaos touched them, They'd ask, is this true? Is this useful? Is this mine to carry? And those three questions became their filter, became their immunity, because most of the time the answer was no. It wasn't true, it was just opinion, it wasn't useful, it was just noise, it wasn't theirs. To carry it was someone else's stuff, and so they let it go. Not by forcing it, not by pretending it didn't exist, but by running it through their framework and recognizing it didn't pass. Marcus Aurelius had his own framework. He'd ask, does this prevent me from acting with virtue? Does this stop me from being just generous, self-controlled? And if the answer was no, if the external thing didn't actually prevent him from living according to his values, then it hadn't really harmed him. It was just something that happened, and he could let it pass without letting it poison him. Here's what building your framework looks like. You sit down and you define your principles. You ask, what do I actually believe about my worth, about my path, about what matters? And you write it down, you make it concrete. And then when negativity comes, when criticism arrives, when chaos touches you, you run it through your framework. You ask, does this align with what I know to be true? Does this violate my actual principles? Does this contradict what I've decided matters? And if it doesn't, if it's just noise, if it's just someone else's stuff, then you let it pass, you acknowledge it, and you release it. Because it didn't pass the filter, because your framework protected you. Seneca wrote, true happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence on the future, and part of enjoying the present, part of staying peaceful, is having a framework that protects you from internalizing every piece of external chaos that tries to get in. And without that framework, without those principles, without that filter, you're defenseless, you're vulnerable, you're absorbing everything. So build your framework. Define your principles, create your filter, and let it do its job. Let it protect you from the noise, from the projection, from the chaos that has nothing to do with who you actually are. The fourth principle is probably the hardest to accept. Immunity requires detachment, not from people, not from caring, not from engagement, but from needing specific outcomes, from needing validation, from needing the external world to confirm what you already know internally. Because the moment you need external confirmation, the moment you need people to agree, to approve, to validate, you've created a vulnerability. You've created a dependency, and that dependency is a doorway for everything to get in. Because now it all matters. Now it all affects you. Now you can't let it pass because you need it to say something about you. Here's the pattern that destroys people. They do something, they create, they build, they try, and then they wait. They wait for the response, for the feedback, for the validation, and their peace, their sense of worth, their emotional state becomes dependent on what comes back. And if it's positive, they're up. If it's negative, they're down. If it's mixed, they're confused. And they're riding this emotional roller coaster, completely dependent on external input, on things they can't control, on other people's opinions, other people's moods, other people's projections, and they call this caring, they call this being invested, when really it's just attachment, and attachment is the opposite of immunity. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, stop caring what people think. But he didn't mean become indifferent, didn't mean stop trying, didn't mean give up. He meant stop making your peace dependent on their approval. Stop needing their validation to know your own worth. Because the moment you need it, you've given them power over you. You've made yourself vulnerable to every opinion, every criticism, every piece of feedback, and you can't build immunity when you're that dependent, when you need the external world to tell you you're okay. Epictetus taught his students, externals are not up to us. And he meant it. Your work is up to you. Your effort is up to you. Your character is up to you, but the response, the reception, the validation, that's external, that's not yours to control. And if you make your peace dependent on it, If you need it to confirm your worth, then you'll never have peace because externals are unstable, are unpredictable, are subject to factors you can't control, and chasing peace through things you can't control is insanity. I've seen this pattern destroy people. They create something beautiful and one negative comment out of 100 positive ones, and that's the one that sticks. That's the one they internalize. That's the one that ruins their day because they needed all of them to be positive. They needed complete validation, and the moment they didn't get it, the moment one person disagreed, one person criticized, their whole sense of worth collapsed because it was built on external confirmation instead of internal alignment. Here's what detachment actually looks like. You do your best, you create, you build. You try and you do it because it aligns with your values, because it's what you believe matters, because it's worth doing regardless of response, and then you release it. You put it out there, and you let the world do what it does. Some people will love it, some will hate it, some will misunderstand it, some won't care at all, and none of that changes, whether it was worth doing. None of that determines your worth, because your worth isn't up for vote, isn't determined by external response. It's determined by internal alignment, by whether you showed up, by whether you tried, by whether you lived according to your principles, and that alignment, that internal measure, it can't be shaken by external feedback because it's not dependent on it. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free," and bravery in this context means doing what matters regardless of response, means creating regardless of reception, means trying regardless of outcome. And that freedom, that independence from external validation is what creates immunity, because now criticism can't hurt you, because you didn't need praise, rejection can't break you, because you didn't need acceptance, failure can't define you, because you didn't need success to know your effort mattered. So here's the practice. Stop asking, did they like it? And start asking, did I do my best? Stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, does this align with my values? Stop needing the world to confirm your worth and start confirming it yourself internally by showing up, by trying, by living according to principles that don't depend on anyone's approval, because the moment you stop needing validation is the moment you become immune to criticism. And that immunity, that freedom, is worth more than all the approval in the world. The fifth principle is this: immunity isn't passive, isn't just letting everything bounce off. It's active, it's choosing what to let in, it's deciding what's worth internalizing and what's worth releasing. And that choice, that discernment, is what makes you anti-fragile, makes you not just resistant, but stronger, because you're not avoiding everything, you're selectively absorbing what makes you better and releasing what doesn't. Here's what most people get wrong about immunity. They think it means becoming hard, becoming closed, becoming impervious to everything. And that's not immunity. That's isolation, that's shutting down. And shutting down doesn't make you stronger. It makes you brittle, makes you rigid, makes you unable to adapt. And rigidity breaks under pressure. What you need isn't imperviousness. What you need is selectivity, the ability to let in what helps and let pass what hurts. Epictetus taught this. He said, "Don't seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and you will do well." And what he meant is, this life brings everything, brings support and criticism, brings success and failure, brings ease and hardship. And your job isn't to only accept the good. Your job is to extract value from all of it, to learn from the criticism, to grow from the failure, to be strengthened by the hardship. And that extraction, that active selection of what to internalize, is what builds immunity, because now nothing is wasted. Now everything can be used. Now you're not just defending, you're transforming. I know someone who got brutal feedback on their work, completely harsh, completely critical, and their first instinct was to reject it, to dismiss it, to protect themselves from it. But then they paused and they asked, is there anything useful here, anything true, anything I can use to get better. And there was maybe 10% of the criticism was valid, was pointing to a real weakness. And they took that 10%, they internalized it, they used it to improve, and the other 90%, the harsh tone, the personal attack, the projection, they let that pass. They didn't carry it. They didn't internalize it. They extracted what was useful and released what wasn't. And that selectivity, that discernment made them stronger, made them better while protecting them from being destroyed. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. He was criticized, he was challenged, he was tested, and he didn't reject all of it, didn't build walls, didn't pretend it didn't exist. He examined it. He asked, is this true? Does this make me better? Can I use this? And if the answer was yes, he internalized it. He let it shape him. And if the answer was no, he let it pass. And that active selection, that conscious choice of what to absorb and what to release, is what made him wise, is what made him great, is what allowed him to be challenged constantly without being broken by it. Here's the practice that builds this. When criticism comes, when negativity arrives, when something challenges you, don't immediately accept or reject. Pause and examine. Ask, what's the truth here? What can I learn? What's useful? And if you find something, take it. Use it, let it make you better, and then release the rest. The tone, the attack, the projection. Release it consciously, acknowledge it, and let it go, because you took what you needed. And the rest doesn't serve you. Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body, but only if you engage with them. Only if you extract the value, only if you use them to build, instead of letting them tear you down. And that engagement, that active selection, is the difference between being destroyed by criticism and being refined by it, between being broken by hardship and being strengthened by it. So don't avoid everything. Don't let everything and be selective. Be discerning, be active in choosing what shapes you and what doesn't. Because immunity isn't about being untouchable. It's about being unbreakable. And unbreakable means you can be touched. You can be challenged. You can be tested, and you come out stronger because you extracted the value and released the poison. Here's what ties all 5 principles together. Building an immune mindset isn't about feeling nothing, isn't about being cold, isn't about disconnecting from life. It's about maintaining yourself, maintaining your peace, maintaining your center while fully engaging with a world that's chaotic, that's critical, that's constantly throwing things at you. And that maintenance, that sovereignty, it requires practice, requires training, requires daily discipline. You create the gap between stimulus and response. You build immunity through controlled exposure. You develop a framework that filters what gets in. You detach from needing external validation, and you actively select what to internalize and what to release. And through those practices, through those principles, you build a mind that can't be poisoned, can't be shaken, can't be controlled by external chaos. Because you've trained it, you've strengthened it, you've made it immune. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, and that power, that strength. It's not theoretical, it's not abstract, it's practical. It's built through daily practice, through conscious choice, through refusing to let everything in and choosing what gets to affect you. Epictetus said, some things are up to us and some are not. And building immunity is recognizing that distinction and focusing all your energy on what is up to you, your response, your interpretation, your choice to absorb or release. And when you do that, when you take that power back, you become immune, not to experience, but to being destroyed by it. Seneca taught that a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials, and the trials will come, the criticism will come, the chaos will come, and your immunity doesn't prevent that, doesn't stop, that doesn't make you impervious to the contact, but it does prevent the infection. It does stop the poison. It does make you impervious to being destroyed by it. So here's what you do. Starting now, you stop letting everything in. You stop absorbing every opinion, every criticism, every piece of negativity, and you start filtering, you start choosing. You start building the immunity that comes from practice, from exposure, from having a framework, from detaching from outcome, from actively selecting what shapes you. And you do this daily in small moments, in quiet choices, in the gap between what happens and how you respond. And slowly, day by day, choice by choice, you build a mind that nothing can shake a center, that nothing can disturb a peace, that nothing can steal, because it's not dependent on externals anymore. It's built on internals, on principles, on the trained capacity to let things pass without letting them poison you. The world will keep throwing things at you. People will keep criticizing life, will keep challenging chaos, will keep arriving, and none of that will stop. But what will change is how it affects you, whether it gets in, whether it poisons, whether it breaks you. And with an immune mindset, with a trained capacity to filter, to select, to release, none of it has to. And when you reach that point, when you've built that immunity, you'll discover something profound. You're not less engaged. You're not less alive. You're not disconnected. You're just free. Free to be challenged without being destroyed. Free to be criticized without being diminished. Free to face chaos without joining it. And that freedom, that sovereignty, that's what an immune mindset gives you. Not protection from the world, but protection from being controlled by it. Stay focused, stay grounded, and remember, everything that touches you doesn't have to affect you. Everything that comes at you doesn't have to get in. You have the power to filter, to choose, to build immunity. And that power, it's not something you're born with. It's something you build daily through practice, through discipline, through the decision to stop absorbing everything and start choosing what gets to shape you. So build your immunity, train your mind, create your filter, and watch how the world can throw everything at you, and you remain untouched. Not because nothing reached you, but because you decided what got in. And that decision, that sovereignty, that's the foundation of everything else.